Well, hey everybody, welcome back to Maine Fish Wildlife. Going to be doing things a little bit differently here for a while with a little remote learning. Chances are, if you're watching this, you've already logged into Google Classroom and found today's lesson and opened up my lecture here in YouTube. Nice job. Let's get right to it. To review what we were talking about last time, we've been kind of focusing in on mammalian reproductive strategies. We talked about the difference between viviparous creatures, those mammals who give birth to live young, and oviparous creatures that lay eggs. Ovi, remember ovum is an egg cell. And those would be things like birds and most amphibians and reptiles and insects and fish and all kinds of creatures around the world are oviparous, but those mammals are unique in that they are viviparous. And then we said there's some crazy creatures out there that are ovoviviparous. So they lay eggs that they maintain internally, and it's seemingly give birth to live young, but we know that's not necessarily the case. So we also mentioned sexual dimorphism, this idea that males and females of the same species can look distinctly different. Quite a few ducks are like this, and we said deer and moose and wild turkeys were our classic example of sexually dimorphic creatures. Within that, there are primary sexual characteristics, those that help directly in the act of mating. We're talking about things like swollen frog thumbs in the springtime and turtle shells that stack together, as well as shark claspers, and those are the three examples that should be in your notes from last time. And finally, those secondary sexual characteristics, much more common, things that help to attract and or fight for a mate. We said a male wild turkey, a tom, is just a big giant pile of secondary sexual characteristics. He's got a beard and a fan and wattles and a snoot, and he's brightly colored and larger than the female, and there's a long list of examples of secondary sexual characteristics on a male wild turkey. And then last time around we left off with this comparison of antlers and horns. We said antlers, some of my favorite structures in the animal kingdom there, are made of bone, and they're shed and regrown each year. And not shown here, we said that antlers are generally found on males only, with the exception there of caribou, in which both sexes regularly grow antlers. But those are the three characteristics we wanted to remember about antlers. We compared those with horns, and we said horns are made of keratin, that same protein your hair and fingernails are made of. Horns grow slowly throughout a creature's entire life, with the exception of that pronghorn antelope, which actually sheds its horns every year. And finally, horned creatures like sheep, goats, and cows and bison and things like that, both sexes regularly grow horns. The males are a little more developed usually, but they both regularly hold them. And you can see in that image there of the bighorn sheep, the male and female, the ram and the ewe, each sporting a set of horns. And we looked for similarities there, and we said the classic glaring one is that they are both secondary sexual characteristics. Antlers and horns both help to fight for and attract a mate. And they're kind of body language messaging to convey age and health without any sort of other communication. They can tell the age and health of each other based on the antler and horn growth there. So moving on today, we're going to compare some reproductive strategies. We've got a pair of strategies we're going to compare here that are directly related, and then we've got another pair coming up here in a few minutes, and we're going to do a brief little assignment on it that I'm going to lay out for you here in a few minutes. So first of all, let's compare precocial versus altricial organisms. All right, now if we look first here at precocial, we're going to see that precocial mammals are born prepared. I always imagine them as ready to go. Precocial, I connect in my mind as prepared. They're born with their eyes open. They're able to move soon after birth, and many can feed themselves right off the bat, although mammals obviously need to nurse from mom. Precocial mammals are kind of rare in Maine. We've only got 3 of them. That's it. So it's kind of an easy list to remember in terms of mammals here in Maine. But for precocial mammals in Maine, we have creatures, we have the moose, as shown here on our slide, the white-tailed deer, the other member of the cervid family here in Maine, and then the third one is a tricky one that most people would know, but our third precocial mammal in Maine is the snowshoe hare. Those guys give birth to little furry eyes open offspring called a leveret, and I always say it's one of the cutest creatures in the animal kingdom. Let's check out a leveret here. Let's look up snowshoe hare leveret. These things are seriously Cute little buggers. Look at this little thing right here. There you have a snowshoe hare leveret. Furry, eyes open. That guy's probably a day old and much different looking than an Altricial offspring, which we'll see here in just a minute. So we'll go back to our Nearpod presentation. So yeah, I think precocial, pre-paired. Birds do the same thing. Some birds are precocial, and the thing you're going to find with birds is that ground nesting birds are often precocial. Wild turkeys, ruffed grouse, pheasants, things that are going to lay eggs right on the ground. They want their offspring to hatch and be able to follow mom to safety immediately. Ducks and geese would follow under that category too. They're going to be downy little fluffy offspring, eyes open, that can feed themselves immediately. Those are precocial birds. But in terms of precocial mammals in Maine, we've got the moose, the white-tailed deer, and the snowshoe hare. Let's take a look at altricial organisms. These guys are born helpless, eyes closed, naked. They've got to be fed by their parents. Most of them are unable to move. And when we look at altricial offspring, we're thinking about just about every mammal in Maine with the exception of the three we just talked about. A good rule of thumb here to remember is that altricial offspring are going to use a den for reproduction. Precocial offspring are often born right out in the wide open, so they've got to be able to follow mom very quickly. All of our squirrels and rodents and all those guys, even black bears are altricial. Bears are born in the safety of a den in the middle of the wintertime. They're nearly hairless. Their eyes are unopened. They weigh less than a pound. Tiny little guys. So all offspring for mammals in Maine, with the exception of deer, moose, and snowshoe hare, are all altricial. When you think about it, people are pretty altricial too. We're born completely helpless, eyes closed. Babies can't see very well for a few weeks. We can't walk around for a year. We're some pretty altricial organisms. And think about how weird it'd be if we were born precocial. Imagine if babies were standing and walking within, an hour or two of birth. That'd be pretty wild stuff. So there you have it, precocial, altricial. Precocial, born prepared, ready to go. Altricial, helpless, eyes closed, kind of naked and afraid there, the altricial offspring. And then the other two things we're going to compare now would be K-selected organisms and R-selected organisms. So precocial and altricial compared what we look like when we're born. Are we born ready to go or helpless? Here we're going to compare the numbers game. Are we going to invest energy in parental care and training, or are we just going to try to produce as many offspring as possible and more quantity over quality? So let's compare these two here. The first being K-selected species. These guys have very few offspring, and they invest a ton of time and energy into raising these offspring, and they really enhance the likelihood of survival on their offspring. But there's a take there, because you're not going to make as many, but the ones you put out are probably going to be better capable of surviving. We see this with a lot of predators and large animals. We have a handful that are classic K-selected species here in Maine. The black bear shown in your slide right there is a great one. Our bears in Maine average 2.5 cubs per sow, and they do that every 2 or 3 years. Sows spend a year and a half with their cubs, and they're just having a handful of them, and there's a ton of parental care. But when those cubs are ready to leave, they are really well prepared by mom. White-tailed deer are the same way. They're going to have 1 to 2, maybe 3 fawns a year. They're going to spend the entire summer with them, and even into the following spring sometimes before they have their next fawn. And moose, very, very similar life history. Those are classic K-selected species. Very few offspring, but tons of parental care. We see this elsewhere in the animal kingdom with things like elephants and whales and other creatures that are going to have just 1 or 2 offspring at a time and invest a ton of care to prepare them for adulthood. Again, the opposite of that, the flip side of that coin would be to be R-selected. And when I think of R-selected creatures, that R reminds me of rodents. When I think R-selected species, I'm thinking rodents and other creatures as well. These guys have many offspring. They invest way less time and energy into rearing them, and some of them will actually produce multiple generations per year. So we're talking our gray squirrels that we study on campus here. They can have 2 litters a year of 4 to 8 offspring, and they're only taking care of them for a couple months and then sending them out into the world. And their survivorship is very low because of it, but it's a numbers game. If you can make enough of them, a few will survive to adulthood to carry on. That's that's an image there of what's called a warren, which is a nest made by our New England cottontail, our endangered rabbit we talked about the other day. They're a classic R-selected species, multiple generations a year, very little parental care. Coincidentally, they're born altricial, helpless and naked. Major difference between rabbits and hares. Hares are born precocial, rabbits are born altricial. And we see this a lot with small prey animals and things like that. So being precocial and altricial is very black and white. It's easy to tell. Being K-selected and R-selected, it's a little bit more of a continuum. It's trickier to tell, and you'll see what I mean here in our assignment. So let's switch gears today. You can always come back and take a look at this video and check these notes again if you'd like. I'm going to post the notes as well to today's assignment, so you can look through there. But let's take a look at our assignment next year. So I'm going to flip back. If you go to Google Classroom, you should find the assignment today. It's called Maine Mammal Reproductive Classification. You're going to work on filling in this table. And what you're going to do here is pick one member of each family. Remember those families from our Maine Mammal Organizer quiz. You're going to pick one member of each family, and you're going to do a little bit of research on it online, and you're going to figure out a couple things. Well, after you put its name in, we're going to give a brief description of the litter size. How many are they having at a time, and what do they look like? That's what I mean by description. Are they furry, eyes open? Are they naked, blind? What do they look like when they're born? Then you're just going to give me K or R. Are they K-selected or R-selected? And are they precocial or altricial? So let's take a look here. I'll do one with you here to get you started, and then I'll set you free. So let's take a look. Nick, which family would you like to pick from, Nick? Oh, yes, Nick. Nick says he would love to do Ursidae. Thank you, Nick. Good man. So Nick wants to do Ursidae. We're going to go here and look at Ursidae. We know that Ursidae is the bear family. And, oh, that makes it easy. There's only one bear in Maine. We know our species name is going to be black bear. So we're working on the black bear here. And I'm going to teach you a little bit of a trick that makes this whole assignment really easy. Wikipedia is your best friend here. It does a great job on an assignment like this. So we want to look up the black bear on Wikipedia. So I'm going to go back to here, and I'm just going to Google black bear. And what we should find right off the bat is a Wikipedia page for the American black bear, Ursus americana. Yes, one of our favorites here in Maine. Now, here's a trick. Instead of having to read this entire page now, and we can do this for each species. If I click on contents and I scroll down through here, a lot of times under like an area like behavior and life history, I can see reproduction and development. If I click on that, it's going to take me right to really the stuff that I need to know. All I need, I bet I can find everything I need right out of this paragraph right here, and I'll read it with you. We'll take a look. It says, sows usually produce their first litter at age 3 to 5 years, with those living in more developed areas tending to get pregnant at younger ages. The breeding period usually occurs in June to July. Yep, I'm skipping along here. Let's see. It says right here, litter size is between 1 and 6 cubs. Typically, 2 or 3. At birth, cubs weigh 0.62 to 0.99 pounds and measure about 8 inches in length. They're born with fine, gray, down-like hair, and their hindquarters are underdeveloped. They typically open their eyes after 28 to 40 days and begin walking after 5 weeks. Cubs are dependent on their mother's milk for 30 weeks and will reach independence at 16 to 18 months, so about a year and a half old before they're independent. At the age of 6 weeks, they're growing here pretty good. So I've read all I need to know here. I can go back to my assignment now, and I can say, okay, litter size. They're saying generally 2 to 3. Description, fine, downy, hair, can't walk, they said in there. I'm just paraphrasing what they were talking about. They're blind. They said they can't see for up to 40 days. And then we know, if we look at K or R selection, they told us there that they spend a year and a half with mom, and that immediately tells me they're having 2 to 3 cubs, and they're spending a year and a half with mom. That is a classic K-selected species. And then lastly, precocial altricial. I look over here. They're born with this fine downy hair. They're less than a pound. They can't walk, and they're blind. That is a classic altricial offspring. And remember, I taught you a little trick there. There's only 3 precocial mammals in Maine, and there's a whole bunch of altricials. So unless you're working on one of those 3 precocials, you kind of know the answer there if you use the process of elimination. So black bears are pretty straightforward. They're pretty straightforward. As I said, they are K-selected, classic, and altricial, classic. What you're going to find with some creatures like the weasels and some of our dogs and cats even, they're not perfectly K or R selected. You're going to find creatures that have like 7 offspring at a time. And where does 7 fit? Really, that becomes a judgment call on your part. Think about parental care, not just numbers, and come up with your best shot. I'm a little more lenient on K or R selected here because this is more fluid. Precocial altricial is really black and white. It's all about, are you born hairy, eyes open, ready to go, or are you born naked and afraid? So those are easy things to figure out using Wikipedia. I'm available via email all day. You need anything, have any questions, shoot me an email. I'm here to help you. Help me help you, people. And we'll get through this. We'll be back in class together here eventually. Good luck. And let me know what you need.